Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa. And this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners!
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
We are always so appreciative of when you join us. We know your time is valuable, and it means a lot to us that you come and hang out with us so that we can talk true crime.
We really do. And Melissa and I are on the same wavelength because I wanted to start this episode by sincerely thanking each one of you for listening. Sometimes some of you send us messages or leave really nice comments on our social media posts. We do read every comment, and honestly, your kind words really help to keep us going. We recently gained a new listener named Amanda, and I know that she is binging her way through all of our episodes. So I wanted to give her a surprise shout out for when she finally reaches this one. Thanks, Amanda, for listening and for vocalizing your support. Amanda definitely is not the only one to interact with us. I hope you know that we love you all. To mention just a few more, Trish, thanks for your comments. Naomi, thanks for the hilarious TikTok you sent us. And Jennifer, we appreciate your messages. We also are excited to see people commenting on our monthly sticker draw questions.
We've already had one winner, and we are looking forward to more.
Absolutely. So if you don't follow us on Instagram or Facebook yet, come on over. It's one of the ways that we get to know you. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you listen so you never miss an episode.
We love the community we're creating.
We really do. More than I think you realize. But speaking of episodes, Melissa and I always try our best to bring you a wide variety of cases that occur in differing situations. I always say that anyone can kill you, and so covering a variation of cases allows us to take a deep dive into as many scenarios as we can. The more we know, the more we can look out for red flags or warning signs. However, in today's case, the victim did not have any warning. She was completely blindsided by a dirtbag.
Completely random?
It wasn't random, but she had no idea. That being said, this case did bring about a lot of awareness and even changes to California and U.S. laws. This case is about a rising star who had no idea that someone was stalking her.
I was just thinking about covering a stalking case. They're always so creepy.
They really are. And I actually found this case when searching for a completely different type of case. It fell into my lap, so to speak, so I do feel like this is the one meant for today.
All right. Let's hear it.
All right, let's get into it. I am first going to introduce you to our victim. Rebecca Lucille Schaeffer was born into a loving family in Eugene, Oregon, in the United States on November 6, 1967. Rebecca was the only child born to Dana Olivia Wilner, who then became Schaeffer, and Benson Schaeffer, and grew up having a really beautiful relationship with both of her parents. Before I get into exactly who Rebecca was, I feel like I need to highlight her wonderful parents. Rebecca's mother, Dana, actually liked being called by her middle name, Olivia, but I will call her Dana because that is how she is referred to during all of the reports that I found about this case. So I don't want to confuse you if you look up stuff later.
Okay.
When Dana was 20 years old, she met and married Benson Schaeffer. Rebecca was born 4 years after they wed. The family moved to Portland in 1980. In Portland, Dana taught English and creative writing at Willamette University in Portland Community College. She herself had earned a master's and a master's of fine arts from the University of Oregon. On top of teaching, Dana published poems, short stories, articles, plays, and even reviews.
Sounds like she was quite creative.
She really was. And Rebecca's father was also highly educated. He was actually Dr. Schaeffer and practiced as a child psychologist. By the person who Rebecca ultimately became, it was clear to me that she was undoubtedly loved and deeply cared for in every sense of the meaning. If I had to describe her in one word, it would likely be radiant. Benson has spoken about how easy Rebecca was to raise. She would try hard, and things would just come to her. Rebecca attended Lincoln High School in Portland. She was one of those types of people who are popular without even trying.
That goes along with that radiant personality. You just draw people to you.
Absolutely. I think we all know people like that. She was definitely one of those types of people. Being raised in the Jewish faith, when it came to a career choice, Rebecca initially wanted to become a rabbi. But fate had a different plan for Rebecca. While in grade 11, Rebecca started to do some modeling and would star in the school plays. In my research, I did look at pictures and videos of Rebecca. She had this energetic beauty about her. She was fair, had a smooth complexion, big bright eyes, and amazingly full and curly dark brown hair. She really had a star quality about her.
Sounds incredible.
She absolutely was. It didn't take long before Rebecca got hired to model in department store catalogs. She then branched out to commercials and even appeared as an extra in TV shows. When Rebecca was 16, during the summer of 1984, she had the opportunity to work with Elite Model Management in New York City. Elite Model Management convinced the Schaeffers to let Rebecca extend her stay in New York City and continue working for them. Dana and Benson had gone after their own dreams and allowed Rebecca to do the same. They wanted nothing but the best for their little girl.
Was she there alone?
Well, while pursuing this dream, Rebecca attended professional children's school in New York.
Okay, so she was away at a private school.
Yes, but I'm unsure if she actually lived at the school or if they just had separate housing.
Okay.
The school is still in operation, now in its 110th year. This school is specifically for children who are working or aspiring to be actors, dancers, or musicians. And I believe it now also includes students in sports, literature, and fashion.
So it's like what we would have here as an academy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Some of the alumni from this school includes Diane Lane, Ricky Lake, Leighton Meester, Sarah Jessica Parker, Julia Stiles, Uma Thurman, Christina Ricci, and even Vera Wang, just to name a few.
Oh, that's quite the alumni.
There was pages of people that you would probably know who have attended this school. During this time in New York, Rebecca got herself a short-term role on the soap opera Guiding Light, playing Mandy Sue Lewiston. Remember that this is now mid-80s and soaps were all the rage. Soon after this role ended, on Guiding Light, Rebecca got a role on the soap One Life to Live, as the character Annie Barnes, which lasted about 6 months. Her co-workers were amazed at how good she was at such a young age. Rebecca tried to also pursue her modeling career during this time, but was told that she was too short to make it. She was 5'7". So in 1985, she went to Japan to try and make it in the modeling world there. Modeling, though, didn't seem to be in the cards for her in Japan either. So Rebecca returned to New York. In New York, she continued to get some acting and modeling jobs, which included appearing in an episode of Amazing Stories. It didn't take long for Rebecca to get her big break. CBS television producers were starting to cast for an upcoming sitcom named My Sister Sam. The star of the show was an actress named Pam Dauber. She previously starred with Robin Williams in The Mork and Mindy Show.
That one sounds familiar.
Yep. And she was actually married to Mark Harmon, who was voted sexiest man alive while in his prime.
Oh, okay.
So they were quite the Hollywood power couple.
And now you have this young 17-year-old that gets to hang out on the set with her.
Yes, even more than just on the set. Rebecca auditioned, and this is how Rebecca became Patti Russell, the teenage sister who moved from Oregon to San Francisco to live with her 29-year-old sister named Sam or Samantha after their parents died. Ironically, Rebecca moved to California for the role. It was an opportunity of a lifetime. This character of Patti was a vibrant, adventurous, and charismatic one for Rebecca to play. And initially, the show was a big hit, ranking in the top 25 TV shows. I believe it was ranked number 21 overall and number 1 on CBS. The show only ran from 1986 to 1988. Ratings seemed to drop in the second year as fast as they had originally risen. So after 2 seasons and 44 episodes, the show was canceled. It is believed that the downfall of the show was because it got moved from Monday night primetime to Saturdays opposite The Facts of Life. And they couldn't compete with that show.
Oh, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Even though the show ended, this seems to be the start of what should have been a full and successful acting career for Rebecca. She was considered a rising star, and I honestly think she would have been if it weren't for a deadly obsession that started with the promotion of My Sister Sam.
So somebody that worked on the show?
No. The young man who would eventually take Rebecca's life was a dirtbag named Robert Bardo. He first saw Rebecca while watching a different TV show, and an advertisement for My Sister Sam was aired. This was before the official release of the show. He was immediately smitten and the wheels of his deadly obsession were put into motion. Robert John Bardo was born on January 2nd, 1970, so he was 16 when he first laid eyes on Rebecca, who was almost 19 at the time. Robert was born at Edwards Air Force Base in California. His father was a non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force. Robert's mother, I believe, was from Japan, and Robert was the 7th and last child born to the Bardo family.
That's a lot of kids.
It is. Since Robert's father was in the military, they moved around from base to base, but eventually settled in Tucson, Arizona. It is reported that Robert had a rough childhood. He was said to be abused by one of his older siblings and didn't have any friends. In 1983, Robert threatened to take his own life and was placed in foster care as a result, although I'm unsure how long he was in the system. Mental illness did run in Robert's family, and he was diagnosed as a teenager with bipolar disorder. He would also later be diagnosed as schizophrenic. By the time that Robert turned 15, in grade 9, he dropped out of Pueblo Magnet High School. Around the same time, he was placed in an institution for a month to treat what was referred to as quote-unquote emotional problems. Remember, this was the 80s, and we still weren't where we needed to be when it came to mental health care. I would actually be curious what his diagnosis would be today.
Love that diagnosis of emotional health problems.
Right?
So generic.
It really is.
We don't want to spend the time dealing with this. That's what that says to me every time I read it.
Yeah, emotional problems.
Yeah.
And I think we still struggle with that today, let alone back in the 80s.
It's true.
Robert did manage to get a job, and it sounded like he held it down for a while. He was hired as the custodian of a local Jack in the Box restaurant. People who knew Robert knew how unhinged he was. Leading up to Rebecca's murder, Robert had been arrested 3 times for things like disorderly conduct and domestic violence. He was said to act not only violently, but also strangely. He was clearly struggling with his mental health, and from what I could gather, he was not under any specific treatment for his mental health illnesses. I did watch a video of him, and his demeanor is honestly unsettling.
So is his family still in the picture at this time? Like, are they trying to get him help too? Or have they kind of washed their hands of him by now?
I believe they're still in the picture because he still has contact with his siblings. I'm not sure about his parents. I think they are all still in the picture, but it sounds like there definitely was some dysfunction, and a lot of them were struggling with their own mental health illnesses.
And I shouldn't say washing their hands of them, because I recognize that it's hard to deal with a family member with these issues, that sometimes you do have to separate yourself. But it's always interesting to understand the supports or the lack of supports that a person has.
I don't think he was getting very much support. Or if he was, it wasn't the supports that he needed.
So hard when you have these familiar trends in families. And especially with mental illness, it's different than a physical illness because oftentimes with mental illness, the actual illness causes isolation.
Definitely.
And isolation is the exact opposite of what most people need.
And it was said that he didn't have any friends. Not one.
Right, because he was probably difficult to get along with.
Definitely. They just said he was strange and then he would be violent.
Right.
We had a lot going on. Retired police detective from the Los Angeles Police Department, Jeff Dunn, said about Robert, quote, "Robert Bardo was a troubled young man. There was a history of a troubled childhood. He had threatened neighbors and schoolmates."
Isn't it sad when everybody's like, yep, he was troubled. He was in trouble. And nobody picked up on the fact that he needed help to stay out of trouble?
Yes. I totally agree. This is definitely one of those cases where the murderer goes unchecked, which ultimately leads to deadly consequences. This is so frustrating when we see something like this case unfold in hindsight. Rebecca, though, wasn't the first person whom Robert became obsessed with.
That's not a surprise.
Nope. From the information that I could find, Robert first became fixated on a child actress and peace activist named Samantha Smith. She was just 2 years younger than Robert, so this was when he was younger as well. Robert would try to contact Samantha but wasn't able to. He would try to track her movements like he would later do with Rebecca. At one point, Samantha traveled to the Soviet Union, as it was called at the time, and when she returned to her home in Maine, Robert decided that he needed to meet her. However, thankfully, he never did. He set off towards Maine to see her, but he had an encounter with a police officer over a traffic violation, and he was afraid that he was now known by the police, so he left and went back home.
So he's displaying signs of paranoia. Which worked out good for Samantha Smith.
It did, thankfully. I'm unsure how exactly Robert got to Maine or if he made it all the way there. It would have been almost a 2-day drive nonstop if he drove himself. The only reason that Robert's obsession with Samantha ended was because on August 25th, 1985, at the age of 13, Samantha sadly died in a local plane crash. She was remembered as America's youngest ambassador. Robert later admitted that he was not planning to give up on her until she did pass away.
That's a disturbing thought, especially since he goes on to kill the next person he has an obsession about.
Yeah, he said, I wouldn't have given up meeting her. It's very unnerving. Next, Robert began focusing on 2 different pop stars, to whom I personally loved, Tiffany and Debbie Gibson. I cannot tell you how many times I sang and danced along to Tiffany's I Think We're Alone Now song, but it was a lot. It really was. I'm not even embarrassed to admit it.
I can totally envision you doing that.
Yeah, the dance she had in her video, I totally did.
He's even acting it out with her hands right now.
Yep. Robert later said that his focus on these 2 pop stars never turned into stalking because they were in New York City and he couldn't figure out a way to go and see them in person.
So he was realistic about his goals.
Yeah, he's like, these ones are maybe going to take too much work.
Nice.
Right? But Robert had a clear pattern. Unfortunately, these things that happened in regards to stalking, no one would have had any idea about at the time, because he wasn't broadcasting this news to everybody.
Oh, okay.
This was all things they found out later.
So people didn't know about his stalking behaviors ahead of time. These were all little dirty secrets that he kept to himself.
Right. Nobody knew that he was going to go see Samantha and wasn't going to give up on her. She just unfortunately happened to pass away. And then he was like, okay, now I'm going to focus on these 2 pop stars. Well, that's not going to work out. My Sister Sam aired its pilot episode on Monday, October 6, 1986, scheduled between Kate and Allie and Newhart. Rebecca was staying with her co-star, Pam Dauber, and was living her best life. The 2 were said to have become quite close during filming. They were playing on-screen sisters, but I imagine they actually developed a bit of a sisterly relationship, which must have been nice for Rebecca, who was an only child. The 2 even looked kind of like sisters.
Oh, you can see how she would just fall into that lifestyle then.
Definitely. And Pam Dauber later said about this time with Rebecca, quote, "We just kind of fell into this sisterly thing, because I'd had a sister. My sister passed away when she was 22 and I was 25. And so having another young girl in the house was something I was very comfortable with. It was good for us. When Pam saw Rebecca audition, she just knew she was it."
Aww, you can just tell, like you can actually see the bond forming between them.
You absolutely can. And even like 30 years later, I watched an interview with Pam and she just really loved this girl. Took her under her wing and they had this sisterly bond.
Which is so incredible considering she was a complete stranger to begin with.
Right. And only 16. Like it was almost completely parallel to what they were portraying on the television. But she said living together really did make us close and it made the show that much better because we did develop this bond.
Now I'm sad I didn't get to watch it.
I know. Robert watched and taped every single episode and was said to become enamored with Rebecca and the character that she played. He found his new obsession. At first, Robert began sending fan mail to Rebecca. He wrote her a lot of letters, and she actually responded to one of them saying that his letter was one of the nicest ones that she had gotten. I think she also sent him a glossy pic of herself, which I'm sure she did to all of her fans.
Yes. Are we sure she even wrote those letters back?
She did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an interview about that. Pam, her co-star, actually had a dangerous stalker during her career and warned Rebecca not to give out personal information and told her things like, don't put your name on your mailbox. Other people in the agency that Rebecca worked in also warned her not to write back to the fans. They explained that it will make them think the relationship is a two-way street. They told her to only send a signed photo at most. But Rebecca didn't see the harm in it. She said that she didn't really see herself as a celebrity and was just wanting to be nice.
Well, you can totally see that, especially with her upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, she had this beautiful but naive trust in people.
And with her dad as a child psychologist, she would have wanted everybody to feel included and important.
Yes.
Oh.
She had been taught these values. I am sure that Rebecca never gave this particular fan another thought, because she wrote back to everyone. But Rebecca would consume this fan's thoughts incessantly.
So I can just envision how Robert's acting and what that's going to lead to.
Yeah, it's just growing. It's snowballing, for sure. Sometimes when a celebrity, especially in today's day and age, is accessible to us to see through video, we can feel like we almost know them. Or we can start to feel like they are that character that they play. For example, to me, Ellen Pompeo will always be Meredith Grey.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what she does later. Even in her upcoming show that's going to be airing soon. The difference is, I know that we are not friends and that she is not actually a surgeon at Grace Sloan Memorial.
You wouldn't let her do surgery on you, Christy?
No. Well, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. After the first year of the show, Robert decided that he needed to meet Rebecca. He saved up and took a plane from Tucson to California to see her. Robert stopped and purchased flowers and a teddy bear to give to Rebecca. He showed up at Warner Brothers' studio and asked to see Rebecca. He said that they were friends. The security guard checked with one of the executives and Rebecca. They said that Rebecca was not expecting a visitor, so the guard told Robert that he couldn't see her and told him to go home. Robert did go away, but then returned. I'm not sure how long he waited in between. This time he didn't have a teddy bear and flowers, but he had a knife on him. The knife was hidden, but the security guard once again told Robert to leave, so he never pulled the knife out. The guard said that Robert was more agitated when he returned the second time. Needless to say, this trip did not go as Robert had hoped.
Why did Robert say he had taken a knife with him?
He admits this later in his confession.
Okay.
It just shows that he was angry and he packed a knife with him when he went back.
But he hadn't created some delusion that he needed to save her from somebody and that's why he had the knife or something like that.
No, right now he just wanted to meet her.
Okay.
He thought that they were
Friends.
Almost together.
Yeah.
Yeah. This security guard would later admit that he didn't inform Rebecca about Robert returning. He seemed harmless and didn't cause any real type of scene. He left when he was instructed to do so, so the guard didn't report it at the time. The guard later admitted to the LA Times, quote, "I thought he was just lovesick," which I think he was. He was terribly insistent on being let in. Rebecca Schaeffer was every other word. I gotta see her. I love her. If I could just see her for a minute. But Robert didn't seem like a threat. So much so that the guard actually gave Robert a ride back to his hotel room after he told him that he couldn't see Rebecca. Plus, fans showing up at the studio to see different actors happened hundreds of times before. This wasn't something new.
Right, so it didn't stand out.
Right. So Rebecca wasn't actually really informed about him. Just that, oh, there was this guy who wants to bring you presents, and it was more so her executive that was like, no, she doesn't know him, this was not arranged, tell him to leave. And so then Rebecca was like, okay, like they were watching out for her.
Mm-hmm. Which is a good thing because she probably would have said yes.
I think she would have, if that other woman wasn't there with her at the time. Because of her rise to fame, Rebecca managed to get published on the cover of 17 magazine, which was a big deal for an upcoming entertainer. A little side note, I am a little bit young to have witnessed Rebecca's rise to stardom, but I do remember loving those teen magazines. I can truly say that a portion of my after-school job paychecks went to teen magazines like Tiger Beat and Bop. How else was I going to get pics of Joey McIntyre, Johnny Depp, and Kirk Cameron to put on my bedroom walls? If you know, you know. If you lived in that era, you might be a little young for that. But we didn't have the internet where we could look it up, so we relied on those magazines.
It's true. They always had the best quizzes in them.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. That's what I remember from them.
Yes. What's your perfect man? Yeah. Joey McIntyre. That's who. I was convinced I was going to marry him, but I didn't stalk him.
Which celeb are you most like?
Yes. They were fantastic.
They were good magazines. And It's quite impressive that she made it on the cover of one of them.
That's a huge deal. If you didn't live that time, I just can't even express to you how much that would have meant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You had to be an it girl or an it guy to make it on the cover. And it was just her on the cover. Rebecca and Pam were also featured on the TV Guide. Some of you will be too young to remember, but the TV Guide was a big thing. It was the #1 selling magazine in the US with over 40 million weekly readers at that time.
That's right. Before you could scroll through the guide on your TV, you had to get a physical copy of it.
That's right. My family was too poor. We just had peasant television, 3 channels. But when I would go to my grandma, she would always have the TV guide there. The following year, my sister Sam was canceled, but Rebecca didn't stop acting. In fact, she had done some other acting even while filming the CBS TV show. Rebecca had a very brief scene in Woody Allen's Radio Days movie and had a role in the TV movie Out of Time. Rebecca also became involved in giving back to the community when she became a spokesperson for the children's charity Thursday's Child. She also helped co-host some of the televised Thanksgiving Day parades. After my sister Sam, Rebecca got a role playing Xandra Lipkin in a movie called Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. This was a big role for her. This movie had an entirely different vibe from the wholesome after-school special type TV show that Rebecca had previously been on. Rebecca was now an adult and was acting in a movie that was rated R.
Ooh.
Rebecca wore a bikini in the movie and had a love scene, although I don't believe that there was any nudity.
Rated R back then was different, wasn't it?
Sometimes I think the ratings were a little...
more risque?
Yeah, sometimes.
Like E.T. being rated PG-13?
Yes, we sat down and watched that with our kids, and I was like, oh, wait. I think in the first scene, one of the brothers calls the other brothers, like, pee-pee breath, but using the other word, and I was like, oh, my little girls are watching this movie.
I remember being shocked with the amount of language in that when I was like, yeah, let's watch it with the kids.
Yeah.
No, don't.
No. I'm like, we loved this when I was little.
It's true.
Yeah, it was a different time. But I didn't actually watch this movie, but she had played the younger version of another woman, and she did a really good job at the movie, but it was not the wholesome after-school TV special.
You don't think she was running home to show her mom and dad it?
Oh, I don't think it was bad.
Oh, okay.
But it was just such a difference from what she was playing. And we have to remember that Robert by this time felt like Rebecca belonged to him.
Gonna get jealous because she's in a love scene.
Yes. He believed that she was like her wholesome role that she had played on TV. He couldn't separate her from the character on My Sister Sam. So seeing her act differently in a new movie set him off. He actually felt like she betrayed him. She was talking about birth control and she was in a bikini and there was a scene of her in bed with this man. And he lost it. Dr. Chris Mahandy, a clinical police and forensic psychologist, later said about this moment in time and how Robert was processing. Quote, all those rageful feelings. How dare she? She's mine. She's supposed to stay innocent for me. That gets converted into a plan of cold-blooded revenge. I'm going to punish you and permanently possess you by taking your life. This is what was now happening in Robert's mind. Again, I watched an analysis by Dr. Grande about this case, and he said that this way of thinking can be common for stalkers who end up killing their victims. They can feel like they need to take the life of their victim in order to have them with them, but then often feel remorseful after the fact. This new movie that Rebecca had a big role in was released in July of 1989. This same month, Robert decided that he wanted to purchase a gun. It was definitely his trigger. Robert walked into one of the gun shops local to him and attempted to buy a gun.
They didn't do a health background check?
Well, actually, this gun owner did handle this really well.
Okay.
Police later reported that the store owner could sense that something was quote-unquote off with Robert. So he decided to ask Robert more probing questions. During their conversation, Robert admitted to the gun store owner that he had a history of mental health disorders. This gave the gun owner cause to refuse Robert's service. He told him that he would not sell him a gun.
Oh, good job.
Really good job.
I am impressed.
Yes, if I could figure out what that shop was, I would give him a personal shout out. But I couldn't find it named. Regrettably, though, Robert would find another way to get his hands on a gun. Soon afterwards, Robert convinced his brother to purchase a gun for him. I chose not to include this brother's name because he had no idea that his little brother was obsessed with an actress and had intentions of killing her. Robert told his brother that he wanted to do target shooting, so his brother purchased a .357 Magnum handgun for Robert, but told him he was only allowed to use it when he was with him, to which Robert agreed. It would only be when it was too late that this brother would realize that Robert never intended to use the gun for target practice, and instead had a much more sinister plan for it.
Right from the very beginning, hey?
Yes.
Like, that is why he collected this gun.
Yep. Complete premeditation. Since Rebecca was no longer filming at Warner Brothers Studios, Robert needed to figure out a way to find out where Rebecca lived. Sadly, Robert remembered hearing about a case where a stalker had attempted to murder the object of his obsession by hiring a private investigator, or PI, to get her personal information. The PI was able to find the phone number to the mother of this actress, Teresa Saldana. The stalker contacted her mother and told her that he had a script to deliver for a big role, and so Teresa's mother gave him her daughter's address. This dirtbag attacked and stabbed Teresa in broad daylight, but thankfully, with the help of a bystander, she survived. And remarkably, Teresa went on to make and star in a movie about her attack to try and warn others.
That's incredibly courageous.
It was. I actually watched a documentary where this man was interviewed, and he said he could hear screaming and people were standing around and nobody was helping her. She was getting repeatedly stabbed and no one was doing anything. I think everyone was in shock. And so he ran up behind him and knew he had to get this knife away from him. And she later said that he was her blonde angel.
It is incredibly heroic.
Right? Teresa's attacker got caught. However, this didn't stop Robert from taking a page from his playbook. He too hired a private investigator to find out where Rebecca Schaeffer lived. All this PI had to do was go contact the State Department of Motor Vehicles, and Rebecca's home address was handed over. And for a fee of between $250 to $300, I saw differing amounts, her address was now in the hands of her stalker. It was that easy.
That's shocking that it's that easy.
It was at the time. Robert packed a bag and headed back to Los Angeles. Inside his bag, he had the card that Rebecca had sent to him in response to his fan mail, her photograph, the gun, and a copy of the well-known book titled The Catcher and the Rye. The same book that Mark David Chapman had on him when he shot and killed John Lennon.
There are so many different conspiracy theories about that causing people to go crazy.
There really is. This is not an isolated event. We're not making any claims against the book, but we're just saying.
There are people that do make those claims.
It's true. I have read reports that Robert drove to LA, but I also read that he took a Greyhound bus, and I do think that he took the bus. Either way, he arrived in Los Angeles at around 5 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, July 18th, 1989. It had now been 3 years since Robert became hyperfixated on Rebecca and had first began stalking her. Rebecca was just 21 years old and Robert was only 19. At this time, Rebecca had already done acting for 2 movies that would be released the year following her death. Those movies were both released in 1990 and were titled Voyage of Terror, The Achille Lauro Affair, and The End of Innocence. On July 18th, 1989, the day that Robert arrived in LA, Rebecca was anxiously awaiting the delivery of the script for the 3rd Godfather movie. She was invited to audition for a part in this movie, Al Pacino's daughter.
Would have been huge.
Yes, and the chances looked favorable that she would land this role. Neighbors would later say that on this day, Robert had walked around for a bit, showing people Rebecca's photo and asking them if they knew where she lived.
Didn't he have her address already?
Yes, but I think he was just trying to make sure.
He didn't trust his PI.
I don't know what he was thinking.
Who can understand his mind?
Now 21, Rebecca had her own apartment on North Sweetser Avenue in West Hollywood. Rebecca's boyfriend, who we will talk about later, said that she was scared the first few nights living there alone and called him while holding a knife for protection. It was just very different. It was a very busy area of Hollywood. At this time, the intercom on her building was not working, and so she had to physically go down to answer the door if someone wanted in. Because she was expecting the script that could have made her a household name, Rebecca was keeping watch to make sure not to miss the delivery. Unfortunately, Rebecca would never see the script. Instead, in the morning of July 18th, Robert knocked on her door. Thinking her script was being delivered by a courier at 10:15 a.m., she ran down and opened the door. Robert showed Rebecca the letter that she had sent to him, as well as the signed photograph she gave him in response to one of his letters that he had sent to her. Robert told Rebecca that he was her biggest fan. Rebecca was polite, but obviously did not have the same infatuation with Robert as he had with her. She ended up shaking his hand and told him to, quote, "Please take care." Robert left and went to a nearby diner to get something to eat. He later would say that he went back to her place to give her a letter and a CD that he had brought with him for her. I am sure Robert thought that he was going to arrive at her doorstep and the two of them would instantly be together. He thought he knew her intimately and that they were supposed to be together. She belonged with him. Needless to say, Robert was upset when he didn't get the fairy tale response that he thought he should. According to Robert, this time, Rebecca was impatient with him. When she opened the door, she said, quote, "You came to my door again." Robert said it felt like he was bothering her.
He probably was.
He was. She was waiting for this big script.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca then said to him, quote, "Hurry up, I don't have much time." Robert later admitted about this, quote, "I thought that was a very callous thing to say to a fan." So he told her, quote, "I forgot to give you something." He then proceeded to take out his gun and shoot her in the chest. I watched a video of Robert talking about this, and he is so dissociated almost when he mimics what she said. According to Robert, as she laid on the brick entranceway of her building, she kept yelling, "Why? Why?"
Does seem so senseless.
It was. This part of the interview is especially disturbing to me. It was like he was describing an epic fight in high school, not a dying woman's last words. Robert didn't stick around to answer Rebecca. Instead, he took off running like the coward he was. As he ran away in flip-flops, he tossed his copy of The Catcher in the Rye onto the roof of a nearby building. He also hollered that he had just killed Rebecca Schaeffer.
So did he think The Catcher in the Rye was going to lead police to him? Like, why throw your book?
I think so. I think it was to make a statement.
Oh, okay. And he's making a statement by screaming out loud that he's just committed murder as well?
Yeah, but he is fleeing. He does run.
Okay. But he's saying he murdered someone as he runs away.
Yes. I just killed Rebecca Schaeffer. About the book, he would later claim that it was just a coincidence that he had it on him at the time. To this, I say hogwash. He had obviously been studying other stalkers turned murderer cases. Robert had also included John Lennon's lyrics in some of his letters to Rebecca. And I also learned while researching that most stalkers will study other stalkers for tips and tricks.
That's disturbing.
Very common. One of Rebecca's neighbors heard the single gunshot and her cries and came to the young woman's aid. He called 911 and then tried to stop her bleeding by pressing fabric on her wound. Rebecca was rushed to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which was less than a mile away. She was pronounced dead 30 minutes after arriving there.
He shot her right in the heart then?
It did nick her heart, but I couldn't find where. Rebecca's mother, Dana, recalled getting the news about her only child's death. She had missed a call from Rebecca's friend. She was in the middle of working on a play that she was writing, so called the friend back about 10 minutes later, at 12:15 p.m., almost exactly 2 hours after a dirtbag had knocked on her daughter's door. About this conversation, Dana said, quote, "I still remember how sunny my voice sounded when he picked up the phone. Then he said, and these words are inscribed in my brain, 'Mrs. Schaeffer, I have terrible news. This morning, Rebecca was shot and killed.'" Rebecca's mother called the hospital, but all they could tell her is that a woman had been admitted and had died. Dana said, quote, "At that point, I kind of knew. Then the detective called, and it was all over." And I just think that this would have been so awful, being in a different city and being told that your daughter was murdered. I am sure she called the hospital in hopes that it really wasn't true.
It would all just seem so final before you even knew anything was happening.
Yes, it would have been a shock. It would be said that this moment changed everything for the Schaeffers. Their lives, especially Dana's, were split between before and after the murder. Thankfully, it did not take long for police to figure out that Robert was the dirtbag they were looking for. The very next day, Robert was found back in Tucson, running in the middle of traffic on a freeway. He said he was trying to end his life. When police picked him up, he told them immediately that he had shot someone, and he had been again yelling that he killed Rebecca Schaeffer while running on the road.
Had he had a psychotic break?
It sounds like it to me. When police did a pat-down of Robert, they found a picture of Rebecca in his pocket and noted that he appeared like he hadn't slept. While later being interviewed by police, Robert stated, quote, "My feelings for her were uncontrollable. I was a fan of hers, and I may have carried it too far." He also wrote this to his sister and admitted, quote, "I have an obsession with the unobtainable, and I have to eliminate something that I cannot attain."
The unique thought process. If I can't have it, then I have to get rid of it.
Yeah. If I can't have it, no one can.
Actually, maybe it's not that unique.
I have to eliminate it so I can stop obsessing about it. Because he thought that Rebecca was unobtainable, he later told a psychiatrist about when Rebecca first opened the door. Quote, It's her. There she is. She's right there in front of me. She wasn't dressed up glamorously. Just a regular person. Just me and her. Robert also later said in a jail cell interview about Rebecca, quote, there was something very special about her and that he, quote, just couldn't let go of her. Robert's trial began 2 years after Rebecca's murder. The trial took place in California. He had confessed, so his guilt was not what needed to be determined. The question that had to be answered was if he was guilty of first or second-degree murder. Was his actions premeditated, or was he acting on impulse? Arguments would be made for both sides.
There was no determination of if he was insane or not?
He does get a psychological evaluation.
Okay, and they deemed him fit to go through with the trial.
Right. Everyone agreed that Robert was mentally unwell, and I believe that it was during the trial that he was given the diagnosis of schizophrenia.
Okay.
Marcia Clark was the prosecutor in the case, and she would become very well known just a couple of years after this trial when she would lose at trying to convict O.J. Simpson, a trial that hit the mainstream media. Marcia Clark argued that Robert had the gun behind his back before pulling it out to shoot Rebecca, proving that he was lying in wait. That would prove premeditation. It was argued that although he had these mental health conditions, Robert did not hear voices telling him to kill Rebecca, and his condition did not make premeditation impossible for him. Robert did try to claim that a song called Exit by U2 influenced him to murder Rebecca. The song was played in court as evidence, and Robert mouthed the words to the song while it played.
While he's trying to use that as a defense.
Yes, the audacity.
Oh.
He sat there just like, yeah, man, good song, mouthing the words. And a little side note about that, I read that when U2 found out about Robert's claims about the song on their Joshua Tree album, they didn't play the song Exit Again live until 2017. So it disturbed them too.
That would be disturbing to hear that somebody has used something you've creatively made in a negative way.
Yes.
Or as a motive.
Right. And I don't know if that was just a false claim or if he really felt that way. The trial was a judge-only or bench trial, meaning that there was no jury. On October 29th, 1991, the judge found Robert Bardo guilty of first-degree murder, and in December of the same year, he sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert was sent to serve his time at the Avenel State Prison in California. There are a lot of things that transpired as a result of this case, but before I get to that, I want to share just a few more things about Rebecca. Rebecca Schaeffer's funeral was standing room only in a synagogue in Portland, Oregon. Benson, Rebecca's father, stated, quote, I was still personally in a state of unreality. The world just seemed physically wrong. The inscription at her gravesite reads, quote, Beloved daughter and courageous spirit, Rebecca Lucille Schaeffer, I am so wise, to think love will prevail, I am so wise. Because this case was so public, and because Rebecca was able to touch the lives of so many, I want to share a few quotes given by her loved ones and by those who knew and worked with her. Quote, What the world really lost was an angel. I lost a friend. Hollywood lost a rising star, and the world lost an angel. Quote, She didn't have an enemy in the world. She was one of the nicest people I've ever known. Sincere, honest, and kind. She was a successful young actress on the ascent, getting job after job. I can't believe this has happened. Quote, She was extremely curious and spirited. We'd travel, go to parks, have picnics. She liked to horseback ride or just spend time on a mountaintop. She was the only actor I've ever known who managed to become successful and remained unjaded. Overall, she lived a very quiet life. She was sensitive, kind of a loner. Quote, Rebecca liked to stay home and read and play with her cat. She liked classical music. She liked going to the Hollywood Bowl. She was very healthy, so she would work out. She would go for walks. She never went to Hollywood parties. Quote, She was so natural. She was herself. There was nothing phony about her. There was nothing put on about her. She was amazing. Quote, She was wise beyond her years, but she was naive in some ways because she was very trusting. She had such an open heart. Benson said about his daughter, quote, We were very lucky as a family. She was sort of a mystery because if she wanted to do something, she could do it. She really sort of learned by looking and doing, and it was easy. He was also able to recall their last conversation that they had. It was over the phone about her upcoming audition. Thankfully, they ended the call by both saying, I love you to one another.
How important would that be?
Right? Because they were excited to hear all about it. Dana, Rebecca's mother, described her daughter as effervescent and magnetic. I could read page after page of quotes speaking to how much Rebecca was loved and how truly wonderful she was. Dana passed away in 2022. I hope that she and Benson were able to find some healing after the tragic loss of their daughter. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this case was pivotal in making changes to not only California law, but to that of the entire United States. Soon after Rebecca's murder in 1990, California was the very first state to pass anti-stalking laws. It wasn't illegal before this.
That's hard to fathom.
Right? It's always interesting when we find these cases that helped create law. Every other state has since established laws making stalking illegal. I just thought, can you imagine if these laws were not in effect before the birth of the internet?
Crazy.
It would. Stalking is a terrifying thing for someone to go through. So many celebrities have had to rely on these anti-stalking laws that were put into place. There have been some pretty scary instances for celebrities like Sandra Bullock, Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, Madonna, Drew Barrymore, Justin Bieber, Rihanna, and many, many more. According to a German study, it is estimated that almost 80% of celebrities have experienced some sort of stalking during their careers.
It's really high.
Yeah, it was actually like 79%. Laws were also put into place in regards to what information the DMV were allowed to legally release. Reportedly, in 1988, the year before Rebecca's death, the California DMV had received 16 million address inquiries just in that year.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around why you would even need to go to the DMV to inquire of an address.
I guess that's the way that you did it. I need to mail my aunt a letter. Can I get her address? But there's no way to know who's wanting that address for a sinister reason.
Right.
Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act in 1994, which required that all states follow suit. Rebecca's death caused an understandable outrage in the entertainment industry. Brad Pitt had not quite made it big yet at this time and was reported as saying, quote, "It's no consolation, but the impact of her loss and the sense of awareness and safety for younger actors was huge." This was a very pivotal case. The Screen Actors Guild also began lobbying the state of California to strengthen privacy protection. The other big issue that was addressed was gun control. Dana joined the cast of My Sister Sam in lobbying for stricter gun controls for years. Benson expressed that working towards change helped them focus their anger. Their main goal was to have built-in waiting periods of gun sales and to have all guns sold by licensed dealers. About this, Benson said, quote, "There's so little we can do about Rebecca's death. We feel good about doing this. It's the only public way to say that what happened to Rebecca isn't right." In 1989, Dana helped co-found Oregonians Against Gun Violence, and in 1991, she traveled to Washington, D.C. to support the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, which was signed into law in 1991 by President Clinton. As you can imagine, a lot of media productions have been made about this case, including different TV shows. I'm going to highlight only 2 productions because they were written and produced by 2 of Rebecca's loved ones. As I mentioned, Rebecca's mother was a writer. In Dana's obituary write-up, it reads, quote, "Dana's greatest professional achievement was the creation of her one-woman show, You in Midair, in which wrote about Rebecca's story with light, joy, love, and humor. It debuted at the Portland Fertile Ground Festival in 2017 and enjoyed a successful run at the Hollywood Fringe Festival in 2018. When Rebecca was murdered, as I mentioned, she had been in a loving relationship with a man named Brad Silberling. They met on a blind date in 1987, when he was 23 and in graduate school at UCLA. Rebecca would have been age 19 when they met and fell in love. He later said that both he and Rebecca were surprised at how fast and how deeply their feelings for one another grew. They were even looking at homes together. People who knew them also made statements about how much in love the two were.
It's almost like they knew they only had such a short time together.
Gave me goosebumps. Brad was devastated when he learned what happened to Rebecca. He spoke about how on the morning that she died, Rebecca had left a sweet message for him on his answering machine. He could not go out on another date for 2 years after her death, and remained close to Rebecca's parents even after he got married in 1995. In fact, the Schaeffers attended his wedding to Amy Brenneman. Brad became a television and film director. His movies that he directed include Casper and Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. However, in 2002, Brad created the movie titled Moonlight Mile. This movie has an incredible cast in it. It stars pre-stardom Jake Gyllenhaal, Ellen Pompeo, Dustin Hoffman, and Susan Sarandon. This movie is about a young man whose girlfriend is murdered and the relationship that he continues to have with her parents. About this movie, Brad stated to the Jewish Journal, quote, "I wanted to explore this very strange journey that I'd never seen on film, like how you go through every possible emotion in the aftermath of a death. For example, I'd be sitting with Rebecca's parents, and we'd just be roaring with laughter, dishing on people who were mouthing platitudes. There would be this bizarre, completely inappropriate humor at moments you'd never expect." He also later stated, quote, "I was exploring how it is that I ended up still able to find hopeful things in life. I have family now and somehow survived the experience. With this film, I was trying to figure out how that became possible." And I think that this movie has to be mine and Melissa's next movie date.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Not a scary one.
No, but we will cry, I'm sure.
That's okay.
Last update is on our dirtbag. On July 27th, 2007, Robert was stabbed 11 times while on his way to eat breakfast with an improvised blade while at the Mule Creek State Prison. He survived this attack and is still sitting behind California bars, now back at the Avenel State Prison. Ironically, it was said that he was stabbed because he was quote-unquote famous.
What?
Because he had killed someone famous that made him more famous.
And so was the person stalking him, or they just were getting revenge on him?
I don't know. That's all I could find is that he got fixated on or targeted because he was famous.
That is ironic.
Yeah. Robert would have just recently turned 55 and has recently offered his insight in helping police better understand stalking behavior. Last I heard, they are considering taking him up on this offer. I'll end with this quote from Robert about stalking. He says, quote, "I had tried contacting the LAPD Threat Management Unit and they did not even respond, though I am the reason they exist. A stalking case is like an asteroid on its way to Earth. Your efforts are like the little gravity nudge that safely changes its trajectory way before impact. Many stalkers latch onto their delusions the way Linus clings to his comfort security blanket in the Peanuts comics. It is the maladaptive coping skill to their lives. It is frightening." Time to reflect.
And treatment.
Yes. So they have not said no, but they are considering speaking with him. And sometimes getting it right from the horse's mouth might be the best way.
Right. And I wonder if it's a way for him to demonstrate remorse.
I would hope that that would be his reason. Not for fame or clout.
No, but most stalkers feel bad afterwards.
Yes.
And so I wonder if he is feeling some remorse and how do I contribute to making things better?
And that would be a small way that he could.
Restitution, right?
Yes. As long as he's not getting out of prison because of it.
Right. Or making book deals or gaining
some type of deal, some type of gain. That would be the true way to know if he is doing this out of a place of remorse.
Right.
And actually wanting to help. So if I find anything out about that, I will keep you posted.
But I think even him approaching the police and not approaching another author or somebody else speaks more to him wanting it as restitution or trying to make a change than fame or fortune. Because if you want fame or fortune, then you go after being interviewed or signing a book deal.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's hope that that is the truth. And that is the story of an unhinged stalker who took the life of a rising star, all because he wanted her all for himself. The deranged dirtbag, Robert Bardo.
That was an interesting case, Christy. And so interesting that we are both on the same wavelength for doing a stalker case.
I know. But next week, do you have a stalker case for us?
I don't. Next week, I have a case for you that made me really angry.
Oh man, I'm going to have no hope at all, that means. So listeners, I hope you'll join me in maybe having a throat punch episode. But until then,
see ya.
Bye. Now I turn it on.
Oh, I thought I beat you to it.
You did. You can do it again.
Testing. I was so on the ball that time.
I know, but I wasn't. I hadn't quite pressed record. Sorry.
We got to work on our timing.
Get to start.
Oh, yeah.
You're so ready with the testing.
I'm off the ball, people.
Are you reading stuff?
Yes, I am.
Turn it off. There we go. People are going to be like, Christy's so bossy. Like, well, it's either that or I'm talking to myself for an hour.
See, I am on the ball, Christy.
You are.
Oh, dang, I can't remember. Okay, never mind. Scratch that. I am on point today.
You are. That was my next line. I was like, I don't even have to think about what I'm going to say because I have it written right here. How perfect was that? Good job, girl. And you guys don't want to hear me sing, right? And she like slides down the wall. It's great. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it. I love Tiffany.
80s reboot.
Yep.
Because of what happens next.
What eventually happens.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a murder podcast,
Yeah,
Melissa.
know,
Welcome to the show.
Finish them because I've been eating
Are you
them.
sure?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I've had lots. We are eating Reese's Pieces today, people. Thank you, Snack Pantry.
Thank you.
It's less color.
That is true. But I'm colorful enough, Melissa. I didn't need that.
I am not, so...
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.